Hey folks, I'm Caleb Foshi with the Dust Bowl Catholic, and this is my Catholic Dollar. So this week we are talking about security. And no, I'm not going to tell you to go hire some armed guards to stand outside your house or the bank or whatever. What we're talking about is the security you get from peace of mind. And we're going to cover three different types of security as I've seen them. One is life insurance. The second is health insurance. And the third is what I like to call church insurance. So we're going to start off with the encyclical that most people go to when it comes to workers' rights, and that is Rerum Novarum by Pope Leo XIII. It was written back in 1891, where he says, "There are Catholics founding and widely spreading benefit and insurance societies by means of which the working man may without difficulty acquire the certainty of honorable support in the days to come." So this is actually a direct reference to the Knights of Columbus that was started in 1882 by Venerable Father Michael J. McGivney up in Connecticut. And they were started as a life insurance mutual association, basically. So we had immigrants coming over from Ireland largely that were Catholic, and they were being barred from purchasing insurance, one, because they were Catholic, and two, because they were immigrants. And so they banded together and created a mutual benefit society so that if one of them died, because they all worked in very dangerous, usually dangerous jobs, they would, their wife and children would have something to go on afterwards. So, the thought of this insurance idea has been addressed by the church for a long time. This was 1891. So let's look at another reference, this time in the 1960s with Pope John the 23rd. He says in Pacem in Terris, "See to the provision of insurance facilities to obviate any likelihood of being unable to maintain a decent standard of living in the event of some misfortune." So again, we're talking about life insurance to a large extent. By now there are other insurance benefits that are out there, but the church, through their mouthpiece, the Pope, has long realized that the breadwinner, if they're gone, the widows and the orphans are left behind. That's why the church has long stepped in to support them. So by pointing out that we have the ability to support those people in the event that something happens to us is a huge thing. So let's talk about life insurance. First of all, we're going to talk about term life insurance. That's what you want to buy because it's the most simple product there is when it comes to life insurance. It's sold in 10, 20, or 30-year terms, and you pay a certain amount every year. And if you die before those terms end, then your beneficiary gets the amount agreed to on the policy. And they're exceedingly affordable, unless you are uninsurable, which in that case, the other products you won't be able to get either. But, if cancer, of course, is a big problem when it comes to life insurance. Heart attacks are a big problem. Strokes are a big problem. But otherwise, if you've not had any of that, you can get a reasonable insurance policy to help those that you leave behind. Even somebody who's overweight with blood pressure and on medication can still get a life insurance policy for a decent price. So how much should you get? Well, the key idea here is you want to make sure the folks you leave behind have plenty of breathing room. And so I would suggest that you take your annual household income, not your income, but your household income. If you've got two incomes, you and your wife, or you and your husband work, whichever, make sure that you take both of those incomes into account. So if you're bringing in $60,000, which is a normal household income in America, you need to get at least 600,000. Okay, so that's going to make sure that anybody left behind can pay the bills and could potentially, pay off pretty much everything. A house, any other, car or credit card things that you leave behind, anything like that, and then also provide for childcare. Now, that's a huge thing to think about. If you're a one-person household, we are a one-person household. Both I and my wife have insurance policies on us, because if, Lord forbid, something happens to her, I've still got to go to work, and I've got 4 kids at home that need to be taken care of. So you have to keep that in mind. Besides the fact that the actual value of a stay-at-home mom is innumerable. You've got in-home daycare. If she homeschools, you've got schooling, private school pretty much going on there. You've got cleaning and cooking and basic finances and everything else. To be able to hire that out is nearly impossible. So keep that in mind. 10 times your annual household income. Okay? So let's switch gears a little and look at health insurance. Did you know the church says something about health insurance? Well, of course, our favorite Pope, Pope St. John Paul II, did. And so let's check out what he said. In Centesimus Annus in 1991, which was 100 years after Rerum Novarum, says social teaching of the church is evident in the areas of Social Security, pensions, and health insurance. So again, the church is speaking through its mouthpiece, the Pope. Health insurance is something you should have. If you can afford health insurance, whether it be through your employer or through an exchange or something like that, you should have it. It is pretty much an obligation, your duty to have health insurance. It is not your duty to fall upon the government assistance programs when you can actually afford to have your own health insurance. Health insurance is a huge thing. You are not to be a burden on other taxpayers just because you don't want to go buy a policy. If you can afford it, it is your duty to do so. It is our duty to provide for our families. We covered that last week when we talked about, he who fails to provide for his family is worse than a sinner and has disowned the faith, or worse than an unbeliever and has disowned the faith. We've talked about this. It is a duty for us to take care of our family and have insurance in place, both life insurance and health insurance. Let's look at the last thing, something I like to call church insurance. Okay, so this one comes from the catechisms. Let's look. In paragraph 2043, it says the 5th precept of the church, which is you shall help to provide for the needs of the church, means that the faithful are obliged to assist with the material needs of the church, each according to his ability. So we've talked about this before, where we spoke about the tithe. Now, the church does not enforce a 10% tithe. The church says it should come from each according to his ability, okay? But it is a tenet and precept of the church. If you go back to your confirmation documents and materials, you will see that it is a precept of the church. We are to give of our time, talents, and treasures to the church. And so to not do so is to break a precept of the church, and it is potentially sinful. Now, again, the operative phrase in this whole thing is each according to his ability. Okay? If you can only afford, just like the story of the widow's mite, if you can only afford $1, then give that $1. If you can afford much more than that, then you should probably be giving that. So let's look and see what the Bible has to say about this. And I'm not going to the normal Malachi one, which is in the Old Testament. This is a New Testament reference. So here we go. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, it says, let the elders, which means the clergy in this case, who rule well be considered worth of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching. The laborer deserves his wages. So again, if we're not supporting the church, we're not supporting the priests who gave up their life for us, to take care of us, to minister us, and to give us the sacraments that the church provides. We have to take care of the church, and in turn we take care of the priests. And on top of that, if you take care of the church, they also have so many charitable outreach organizations that you're taking care of the charity as your other charity obligations as well. So before anything else, give to the church. So the reason why we're talking about security this week is because next week we will start the process and go down the road of seeing how to pay off your debt and get your financial house in order. But before we do any of that, we have to have a foundation upon which to build. That's where life insurance, health insurance, and church insurance comes in. Because if we don't have a good foundation, something's going to come along and the whole house will crumble on itself. We've got to have these things in place before we make any huge money moves afterwards. Okay. Now, that being said, let's go back to the Bible for a little bit of encouragement before we check out our homework. In Matthew chapter 7, it says, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who has built his house upon the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded upon the rock." So similar to the church, it was founded on Jesus Christ, and the rock, our first pope, St. Peter, which is Greek for rock, we also can build our financial lives upon the rock using church precepts, church teaching, and scriptural guidance. So, let's look at this week's homework. Again, we are going to prayer and calling upon the saints. Go back to St. Matthew this week. Okay, he is the patron saint of financial matters, which includes insurance. We are still going to communicate. This is still a huge thing. You must be on the same page with your spouse, especially when putting insurance plans in place. Your life insurance and your health insurance impacts the entire family. So be sure you're on the same page and have the same goals in mind as you move forward. And third, I want you to go to your HR office, and I want you to hit up your Knights of Columbus agent and get these policies in place that we talked about today. Be sure you're signed up for a good health insurance plan, not a high deductible if you can afford it, because, well, high deductible means high risk if something happens. And get that life insurance in place. Term policies are what you want. Not that the Knights of Columbus offer an inferior product, but term policies are what you want. Insurance is not an investment, it is a safety net. I'm Caleb Foshi with the Dust Bowl Catholics, My Catholic Dollar. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, and put a comment below and tell me what you think about this week's lesson. We'll see you next week, and until that time, be not afraid.